Hi and welcome to another narration presented by yours truly, Cryptid's Roost. Please be so kind as to throw punch the like button and smack the arse of the subscription button as well. And remember to chokehold that notification bell and then select all. That way you'll receive all notifications each time I upload a new video. I would like to reach out and say a huge thank you to those of you who have been supporting Cryptid's Roost financially with your sponsorship. We pray the good Lord replenishes you abundantly, and to those of you who will, later on, we pray the good Lord bless you as you do so. And also a huge thank you to everyone for always supporting the channel with your likes, comments and shares as well. It is all very much appreciated. God bless you all. During every video you should see an info card pop up during the duration of the video. Each of these info cards, top right corner, will direct you to the playlist for the author of this story and will show you other stories from the same author that you may also enjoy. Also be sure to check out the end screen at the end of the video. This will also direct you to two different videos. One will be the most recent video uploaded and the other will be a random video from within my catalogue of stories I have already narrated, so be sure to check those out. And why not hashtag Cryptids Roost in your comments. So grab your coffee, sit back and enjoy the show. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not. The Prisoner of Lunamorte Manor, Part 2. This awesome series is written by Jgrupe, a wonderful author over on Reddit. If you would like to read more of his works, the Reddit link to his profile will be below in the description. And be sure to check out Jordan's new book, Beneath the Asylum. The Amazon links will be listed below for the US, Canada and Britain. Prologue. As the ship disappeared into the distance, I looked out at the dark, white-capped sea and wondered again why I had neglected to get on board. It wasn't the first time I had chickened out at the last second. The growing waves and swirling black clouds above persuaded me to stay on dry land a week prior as well. Before arriving on Lunamorte Island, I had never been afraid of the ocean, but now that I was stuck here and surrounded by salt water, I was developing an unhealthy phobia of it. "Will you need a hand with your bags again?" a dry voice asked from behind, causing me to jump. "Geoffrey, I told you not to do that." "Apologies, of course. Your bags?" I sighed resignedly and handed him two of the heavy bags, ultimately grateful for his help. He took them and turned around, trudging his way up the slippery winding steps towards Lunamorte Manor. Thunder rumbled nearby and I quickly followed after him, the Gothic castle towering over us and casting us in its shadow as we walked. "Why can't I leave, Geoffrey?" He pretended not to hear me. I ran ahead of him and caught up, throwing my bags down and grabbing his prim looking three-piece suit roughly by the lapels. His red rimmed eyes looked stubbornly back into mine, not relenting, not giving an inch of ground. "Tell me, Geoffrey, give me something, anything." "I haven't the slightest idea what you mean, sir. Now, if you will, please follow me. The Count will be expecting us." I let go of him instantly. The Count. Mustn't displease the Count. He would be the one to let me out of this place, I realised. I just had to reason with him. He hadn't wanted to hire me in the first place. Now I just had to convince him that his instincts were right all along. It wasn't the first time I had tried to get myself fired. I was pretty good at it, admittedly. The incident at the restaurant was particularly mortifying to think about and made me cringe internally whenever I did. "Fine, let's go see him then." "I believe that is still the matter of the girls' lessons for today." If you are to stay, you must fulfill your duties here. The Count will insist on that, I can assure you." He began to walk again, not waiting for me to answer, the stone steps becoming increasingly narrow, steeper and more treacherous as we got towards the top. There the huge wood-panelled doorway stood waiting, gargoyles guarding it and standing watch, looking down from above. Thunder boomed and lightning flashed as rain began to pour from the sky, falling torrentially, deafeningly. Geoffrey put his hand on the door to open it, then stopped. He looked to be in deep thought for a moment. "You'll have to find a replacement. He'll keep you here, just like he did to me, unless you find someone to take your place." His words were almost lost in the staccato beat of the rainfall, but I heard them just barely. With that, he opened the door and went inside, not waiting for my response. Finally, I had something to go on, a way out. I just had to find some other sucker to take my place. Why hadn't I thought of that? Lorena and Elena came running down the steps to greet me at the door, their black hair streaming out behind them. Their voices followed and were slightly delayed, and could be seen capering and dilly-dallying on the walls as if they had minds of their own. "You're back!" they shouted in unison, running up to me and hugging me. Their smiles were wide and their long canines gleamed as they grinned. "We knew you couldn't go. You'd miss us too much." I felt bad but needed to be honest with them. They were tough and could take it. "I still have to go, girls. The weather was just really bad again. I'll have to leave with the next supply ship though. But I'll be here for another week at least, so we can finish reading Animal Farm together." Florina especially loved that book. She liked the pigs in it and was immediately enamoured by the story. I read all the characters' parts in different voices, and she'd always giggle at the pigs' voices especially, and the sheep with their chanting of 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. They hurried up to the library where we had our classes together. I told them I would be right up after I took my bags back to my room. Geoffrey had left them at the door for me to handle the rest of the way, saying he needed to go to the kitchen and assist with preparations for dinner. Just then I heard the all too familiar blood-curdling scream which came through the floor from deep below the castle. I would never get used to those. They always made the hair stand up on the back of my neck, made me wish I was anywhere else. At first I had convinced myself it was merely the sea winds blowing through a tunnel in the rocks beneath the manor, but after a while even I didn't believe it anymore. The sounds were too human. The howling screams were coming from the basement of the manor, I was fairly certain, and this was the one place where I was forbidden to go. I knew I needed to help whoever was down there. The Count and Geoffrey had told me exactly what I wanted to hear, that it was indeed the wind blowing through the narrow tunnels beneath the old house. I had been happy to accept that for a while, but no longer. Part of the reason I wanted to flee the island was to get help for whoever was down there. A woman was being held prisoner by the Count. I just knew it. Part of me still wanted to sneak down there to confirm my suspicions, but it was nearly impossible with Geoffrey sneaking around all the time. He seemed intent on keeping an eye on me, appearing out of nowhere whenever I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. There had to be secret tunnels all over the castle to accommodate such swift movement on his part. It seemed impossible otherwise. After hauling my bags back up to my room, I caught up with the twins and helped them with their studies for a few hours. They also had classes with their father which were held in secret late into the night. Whenever I asked about what he was teaching them, to figure out if I could skip my weaker subjects like math or whatever he was covering himself, the girls and the Count would refuse to enlighten me, only saying that it had to do with family history and things that go bump in the night, whatever that meant. So I did my best with teaching them math, not my strongest subject, and English, which is my strongest subject, as well as art, science, music, I'm also tone deaf, and history, all using the dusty, out-of-date books from the castle library. The girls always exceeded my expectations, regardless of the field of study, and I found them to be quite intelligent and precocious. Despite their young age and their fondness for childish enjoyments like games and having a story read to them, they acted more like university students most of the time, especially during their studies. I couldn't believe how fast they picked up every aspect of what I taught and remembered it flawlessly. Soon they were embarrassing me with my lack of insight into tougher subjects like algebra and trigonometry. It made me realise that I had been on the island for far longer than I had thought. I had only wanted to stay for a few months, and already half a year had passed. I had long been putting off things I had been meaning to do, like reporting the screaming abductees in the basement, for instance. That was what prompted me to try and catch the next boat off the island, but alas, it was far more difficult than I had foreseen. After my lessons with the girls, we went downstairs to have dinner with the Count. I planned to make my appeal to him afterwards, but not during dinner. That would not go over well. I was sure of it. As I made my way downstairs towards the dining room, I passed the staircase which led to the basement. Geoffrey was busy in the kitchen, I remembered, and wondered if this might be my chance. After sending the girls ahead, I looked over my shoulder to make sure nobody was watching, then proceeded down the spiral staircase which led down to the cellar. The stone steps echoed loudly despite my efforts at stealth, and I braced myself for Geoffrey's sharp, commanding tone to scold me for my actions. But for the first time, no one did. At the bottom of the staircase was a single door with a barred window at the top, strangely left ajar. I was surprised, since the butler was usually so fastidious. I thought of his red-rimmed eyes as he looked at me outside, black bags beneath like loaded suitcase. The old man was tired. He had simply forgotten to lock up. I swung the door open slowly, listening to the loud creak it made and wincing at the noise, seeming to resonate, echoing up the staircase and towards the top. Proceeding into the stone-walled room, my heartbeat began to hammer against my ribs. I tried to swallow, but my mouth and throat were so dry I couldn't even manage it. My anxiety began to build as I saw what had been kept hidden below the manor. It was a dungeon. I continued in further and saw half a dozen cells with bars and sturdy locks, all hanging open except for one, the one at the end. Weeping could be heard coming from there, soft and suppressed, as if the woman making the sounds knew she was supposed to be quiet. When I got in front of the cell door, I saw her. She was a young woman with tangled, chestnut brown hair, covered in grime and dirt. Her clothes were simple rags, and my eyes filled with tears to see the conditions she was living in. A dog bowl had been put in one corner, and there was newspaper in the other corner for her to... well, you get the picture. It was a tortuous scene, and I immediately felt awful for her. A key was hanging up on a peg nearby, and without thinking I went over and grabbed it, pulling it down from the hook. My hands were shaking as I bent down to the lock and fumbled, trying to insert it. Wait, she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. That's not a good idea. Who are you? Why is he doing this to you? I asked, ignoring her. I got the key in the lock and turned it, opening the cell door. When it opened, she stood up, looking different suddenly. I saw her eyes were odd. One was blue, the other green. I told you that wasn't a good idea, she said. Hairs started growing from her paws, filling her face and arms with fur. She started growing taller, more muscular, and went down on all fours, beginning to growl. I backed away from the cell door, suddenly regretting going down there. What had I been thinking? A massive growling wolf now stood before me, chestnut brown with tangled matted fur. It appeared emaciated and lean, but moreover hungry, famished, starving. It stalked out of his cage on all fours, its breath hot and humid on my face. Drool hung from its long narrowing jaws as the beast continued to grow larger, taller, until it loomed over me, a low rumbling growl coming steadily from within it. It lunged forward, its jaws snapping as it swiped at the air with its tremendous claws, missing me by mere inches as I ducked away. "Back, foul beast! Back in your cage!" Geoffrey was suddenly there beside me, brandishing a blazing torch and waving it wildly at the werewolf. He started thrusting the flame towards the giant creature like a sword, his eyes wide and full of terror. "Run! Get out of here!" He didn't need to ask me twice. I bolted out the room and back to the base of the staircase. Geoffrey followed a few moments after, running quickly out of the dungeon room and slamming the door shut behind him, barring it and locking it as fast as he could. An instant later, snapping jaws were heard at the barred window, desperately trying to bite our heads off. Luckily the door was strong, the locks even stronger. "I told you not to come down here," Geoffrey said, panting and out of breath, still holding the door behind him with his body weight as it shook and heaved in the frame. A steady pounding noise interspersed with a ragged scratching sound of claws scraping wood came from the other side, but then finally ceased. Geoffrey backed away from the door and dusted off his hands, looking at me scornfully. "Now, if you will please follow me. Dinner is served." I felt as if I couldn't really argue with him. He had just saved my life, after all. We got to the dining room and found that the long wooden table was already set. It was covered with a dark vermilion tablecloth, embroidered with the Count's family coat of arms. There were lit candelabras and centerpieces of dark purple and red flowers in brass and golden vases, which I had to look over the top of to see the count. Dozens of different plates were arranged on the table. Meats and fish, roasted vegetables, potatoes and mushrooms, gravies and sauces of all sorts. A big bloody roast was at the centre of it all, to be carved by Geoffrey. Blood poured from it as he began cutting into the unidentifiable animal.
"Ah, my favourite two girls, and a splendid teacher."
We had opted for this as my title since the Count told me he wanted to find a motherly figure to be a nanny for the girls. I got the feeling he was probably already recruiting someone for that position. It just wasn't easy to find someone willing to travel to this Gothic island castle surrounded by dark, treacherous ocean on all sides. I couldn't possibly imagine why. The four of us sat down and began to eat. As always, the food was delicious, seasoned and cooked to perfection.
"Did you have fun in the dungeon with my other guest?"
I had a bite of zucchini in my mouth which I nearly choked on as he said this. I managed to swallow it, probably into my lungs, and a coughing fit ensued. Barely able to contain my terror of what he might do, I tried to calm myself as fast as possible by taking a few sips of water. My eyes darted to Geoffrey, but he had been with me the whole time. So how did the Count know we had just been down there?
I know all that happens within these walls and on this island. Nothing is kept from me here,
he said, as if reading my panicked thoughts. Maybe he was, for all I knew. I finally managed to get over my coughing fit and stared at him uncertainly. The best thing to do, I decided, was to apologise. After all, it was the one place I hadn't been allowed to go, and in retrospect, for good reason. They had actually been trying to protect me from the werewolf girl who they had imprisoned in the dungeon. I had tried to save her and she had tried to kill me, which made me wonder if perhaps she was down there for a good reason, and quite possibly of her own volition. I'm sorry, you told me not to go there and I didn't listen, but I thought someone was in trouble, that you were keeping a woman prisoner down there, which, I mean, you kind of are, but... I realised how that sounded and looked down at the table, feeling strangely ashamed of myself. The girls were looking at me with their jaws hanging down, not believing what was happening.
You will leave with the next supply ship 2 weeks from today. I will not have guests or employees who do not abide by the rules of my home. Your replacement will be on board that ship as well, so do not fret about the girls. I've been told she is very well qualified.
But Dad! Florina and Elena called out in unison.
No buts! But you will stop with your weather tampering and your phobia-inducing psychic spellcasting as well, young ladies. His time on this island is finished. You will not interfere with his departure this time.
The two girls pouted and avoided eye contact with me. So it had been them the entire time. They had been messing with my mind using whatever dark magic their father had taught them, getting me panicked at the sight of the ocean and at the stormy weather, which they were also somehow manipulating. This family was a lot more interesting than I had thought, I was beginning to realise. At first I had just thought maybe they were vampires.
Of course they're vampires, you idiot.
Geoffrey rolled his eyes and kept cutting at the bloody roast. Hey, can I get a piece of that? I asked, holding out my plate, as rare as you can get it.
You know this is a person, right?
I set my plate back on the table and grabbed a piece of fish instead. The four of them stared at me, waiting for my response. There wasn't much I could say, really. I'd just be happy to finally leave this place. I held up my goblet to make a toast. To the Count, I said, hoping to gain his forgiveness. 2 legs good, 2 wings better. Don't forget, if you enjoyed that story, be sure to pop over to the author's Reddit profile and drop them a line, or even give them a glowing review. I'm sure they really would appreciate it. The link to their Reddit profile will be below in the description. Please be so kind as to throat punch the like button and smack the ass of the subscription button as well. And remember to tap the notification bell and then select all. That way you'll receive all notifications each time I upload a new video. Oh, and don't forget to share the video far and wide. This will all help with YouTube's algorithm and will help to promote this channel more. And don't forget to check out the merch store. The link will be in the description and also in the video thumbnail. And if you would like an honourable mention, send in a snapshot of yourself with your purchase and I'll feature it in one of the videos. I now have my very own subreddit community where you can submit any stories you've written. You can submit your stories or encounters either there or send them to cryptidsroost@gmail.com. If you wish to remain anonymous, that's fine with me. All the links are below. I also have a Facebook group, Twitter, Reddit, and you'll also find me on Discord. If you would like to support this channel and help make it grow, my PayPal is paypal.me/cryptidsroost. Again, that will also be below. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not.